Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program, version 1.3, 3, 2, 1, launch. Ooh, ease up on the throttle there. What we have here is what I am calling the Candle Crane, and this is a vessel that, as you can see, has 4 of these candle torch drives, which it doesn't actually have the candle moniker inside this name, but anyways, that's what these are referred to in the VAB as candle torch drives, and this has some of the stuff that the Kerbals that we are going to be sending out to Duna first are going to need for their trip, not for their trip, for their landing. This is some of the base equipment that they are going to be needing at the very beginning, as well as a automated water extractor that I'm going to be dropping off into the southern basin. Not the southern basin, the Midland Sea, the one with the water. I am having a real hard time turning this thing, but yeah, anyways, that does not bode super duper well. I'm not sure. Hold on a second. Electric charge is dropping precipitously. Let's go ahead and start this reactor. What else am I forgetting to do? Oops, we are rotating. Yeah, so this is intended to be a design that can work on both Duna as well as airless worlds, and it has the Delta V required to do a lot of heavy lifting of things and bring them up to orbit and then back down to the surface and then refuel from the various base facilities that we are going to have on Duna. It's not working super great here in Kerbin's atmosphere, but yeah, I guess we are going to see. I think I may need to add some additional reaction wheels or maybe some, I don't know, some fins or something. I'm really not sure what would help at this point. All right, so before we get going too far, I can actually rotate this just a bit so that I can fire off this nose cone. Shoom! Ha ha ha. Okay. Whoa. It exploded. I don't know why it exploded, but it did. Yeah, so we're just going to finish getting this into orbit. We are actually up into... Hold on a second. We could probably do a little bit better by placing a circularization maneuver here. There we go. So yeah, this is... it's just a couple ore tanks out on little outriggers that is attached to... this thing here is the entirety of it. It's got big tank of monopropellant, tanks of ore, tanks of carborundum, a whole bunch of stabilizers, which I was hoping would be working better than they are. But that, I mean, is what it is, I suppose. We are getting a pretty decent amount of torque, and we are able to move around a little bit. We didn't flip out in the atmosphere. We were just a little bit unstable seeming, which I guess is fine. We're carrying a pretty big heavy load here of this automated water extractor, and this little bit here, just this little bit, is supplies that the Duna colonists are going to need for their first stay. Because what we're going to be doing is we are basically going to be expanding the functionality of the existing stuff that we've sent there. So the Geo rover that people went to and did their expeditions to begin with, we are going to be revisiting that and using that as habitation and a mobile assembly lab. So we have this now in orbit, so it's really all that we have left to do with this one is get this on a trajectory to Duna similar to the one that we are doing for the rest of our modules. So as you can see, we have here another, we have our maneuver planted in 119 days. And if I put that on the clock, look at that. By just random variance, it seems to have come a day later, but it's still going to have about the same amount of travel time. So things should be getting there roughly the same time, which is what we are looking for. The Duna Express, you will recall, is the kit with 8 of our do-it-yourself kits that is going to be arriving and dropping off the various components into orbit, but it does not have the capability to actually drop anything to the surface. That is where this comes in. This is going to grab each individual component, then it is going to drop it down on the surface surface of Duna, then come back up for another load of carborundum, refill on ore, and bring down the next piece. While I have transfer window planner open, we can just take a quick look at this, and I want to illustrate the importance of these transfer windows. So even with just a very basic understanding of, you know, wanting to leave when the planets are in good position for us to make this trip, you can kind of see here what that actually means. And like, if we go a little too early, it's 27 to 35,000 meters per second of delta V as opposed to 8,000. If we go a little bit too late after it falls out of alignment again, it goes from 15 to 17,000 all the way up to 53, and it just gets worse from there until it starts going back down and getting closer to this end of the cycle once again in another year or so, year and a half or something like that. So yeah, that's why we do the transfer windows. Even with these torch drives, I find that that's actually going to be pretty important, because I don't want to just be spending delta V frivolously and making things hard for myself, because even these torch drives with their high thrust to weight ratio, we don't want to push things too hard and give myself long burns and things like that. There's really no need to push it at this point. So I have some radiators on here that we are going to activate to make sure that this thing doesn't overheat. The reactor doesn't anyways. And here we go. So this thing is all set up. Just a quick look at what we are dropping off. This is our automated water extractor, and I've actually found I like this design quite a lot. I like the way this looks. Not auto strat. Do auto strat, but that's not what I'm trying to do. Aim camera. There we go. So this thing has a base of this FTT end cap, and then it uses the Honey Badger command cargo pod, which actually has a really high water fuel content, and then it has another this one that I've kind of embedded in here is, there it is. It's another water tank, but the key thing is that it's hooked up to the planetary warehouse. So this thing is going to fill up with a large volume of water, but then this is the one that's going to send it out. I thought it looked really cool, kind of hooked up in that little cage of the adapter there. So I liked the way that looked. That's got communications, it's got logistics so that it can actually push things out to planetary logistics. Battery, it's got its own reactor, radiators, and control. And then over here it has a whole bunch of drills, because this is going to be the only production of water on the entire planet of Duna. So we're going to be dropping this off in the Midland Sea, where it can dig things up with impunity. And then this little bit, open this up, is a cargo container that I've kind of tucked sideways into this little thing here. And that has the inflatable workshop we're going to be using. It has some pipes, it has some screwdrivers, and some explosives that I can use to make things a little easier on myself as I'm disassembling things that are coming down. And then it also has a big tank of life support, which we are definitely going to be needing for the crew that is going to be living on the surface of Duna. And then this is going to get us there. So we will check back on this in another 120 days. All right, we are launching yet more hardware with kind of a neat looking, sort of kind of Proton inspired almost rocket that we are sending up with yet more hardware. 3, 2, 1, launch. Ooh, that's a big one. Yeah, so this is a big cryogenic powered first stage that's really kind of sluggish off of the pad here, especially compared to that torch drive I just sent up. But this one's actually using a fusion drive as an upper stage after I use up all this delicious liquid hydrogen that I have going on down in the first stage. But yeah, this one is going to be the crew descent module and ascent module. This is kind of a revision of the one that I used a little bit earlier on, a couple episodes back, where I was sending people down on the first expedition. This is a modified version of that we will talk about once I get closer to orbit. Alright, so our first stage has run out a little bit earlier than I had hoped, but there it goes ever so slowly. And now we are going to be firing up our second stage, this fusion drive, which before I get too far going, I should actually get these engines started. There we go. get some reactors moving for that. No, they're not... Oh, there they are. I have big ones. Okay. Yeah, so this is a kind of a multi-purpose thing that I have going on here. This second stage is a fusion-based drive that is actually also going to be a tug that I use in the future. So this actually has a docking port. It has fusion drive, battery, carborundum tanks, docking port up at the top, some generators, monopropellant tanks, and communitrons on the side here. So this is something that I could actually use and reuse a whole bunch after I drop off this business here in the front. That's because I had some trouble last time with my previous Duna ascent vehicle, in which I wasn't able to really... I had trouble with the transfer stage. Like, I didn't want to drop the transfer stage into the atmosphere, and I also didn't want to, I didn't have enough fuel to circularize and hold on to it, so I ran into kind of a conundrum. So this is going to be incredibly capable and able to do whatever we need to do over in Duna's sphere of influence, drop this off in the exact orbit that I want, and then this actually has radial engine, so it has these thuds down here that I can use to deorbit and then control our descent with a heat shield here and so forth. Moving up along the craft, just like before, we have a descent stage, which is this one here with the legs, the thuds, and some fuel. Up here we have a Valiant ascent stage, which has some more monopropellant and so forth. That's going to be able to move this thing up. This is actually designed to separate once this thing is up into orbit, and this thing should have enough monopropellant left to deorbit with the RCS thrusters, or the regular fuel thrusters, and then get away from there. And then this top capsule here you see has detachable monopropellant tanks and puff monopropellant engines, which it can use to deorbit once it is brought back into Kerbin's sphere of influence. So, assuming all of those things work, then this should be a pretty fun thing. Of course, I'm realizing now that the one thing I did forget is a ladder. So we're gonna have to very carefully fly to and from this, which I know is possible on Duna, because I'm just now realizing we have forgotten. But that's fine. I'm not too worried about that. Primarily, one of the reasons why I'm not so worried about that is the Kerbals only have to get out of this vessel. They don't necessarily have to get in. I want this to stay on the surface of Duna as an emergency evacuation vehicle, basically. Because I want this crew to be able to get out and go to the Starlifter shuttle, which has the other crew from Duna, and be able to get up there to the habitation that I know works, if absolutely necessary. So we wanted to have that contingency plan in place just in case, because we are not 100% certain of all of the technologies and habitation modules that we are going to be sending out. I am very hopeful that I have thought of everything and that everything will work as anticipated, but you never know with this sort of thing, and that's kind of the fun, right? Is sending our Kerbals out into the great unknown and braving the dangers and seeing if things will work as we hope they will, as we have planned them to be. We don't know. We're going to have to find out. So just like with everything else, I am going to set up a trajectory out to Duna in 50 days. All right, we have another... oops. Lost my target. We have another maneuver, 116 days at this time. I'm trying to make sure that these are staggered so that they don't all happen at the same time. So we will have that in there, and I'm going to be needing to go in and adjust each of these. Probably come in like a day early or half a day early, something like that, several hours early, so that I can adjust the trajectories to make sure that they are actually correct at the time when we go, so that I don't have to worry about planning way out far in the future and whatever errors might be incurred by doing so. All right, well, I see no further reason to delay. I have set up, I have checked out all of the bases that we have, and the Moon Cache base has 1 year, 362 days of habitation time, Minmus Shipyard has 1 year 154, and Minty Station has 356 days, all of which means that we can move on to the transfer window from Kerbin to Duna and actually make the transfer out there, which is going to be roughly 50 to 70 days a piece, and execute those missions before I have to worry about extending the habitation timer of Minty Station once again, which I think we're going to do by proving out some technologies for building on site. So we will do that at some point during the transfer, I think. But for now, let's time warp forward, scary as it is. Alright, we are now a couple hours out, so let's move on to the Duna Ascent vehicle. Alright, so this is the Duna Ascent vehicle's trajectory over Duna, which is a pretty close to polar orbit that's going to take us about 96 days to get to, which is not as nearly as fast as I was led to believe that we would be getting. I wonder if we could do this any better. Alright, so I didn't actually manage to get any better of a trajectory. I could just dump thousands of meters of delta V to get like a couple weeks faster, and I don't think it's actually that important. The 50-day transfer was completely arbitrary, as it turns out, so there's not really any need to go that fast. So this is the trajectory that we're going to be taking, and about 100 days is what we're going to be looking at for all of our transfers going forward, for at least the first couple of vessels that we are sending out that way. We need these all to get there right around the same time, just so that we can get moving on that stuff. So we have about 2 hours and 4 minutes, and then we will be making this burn. Here we go! We are burning off for Duna with our Ascent vehicle. So this is going to be the module that is used for bringing down crew to the surface. At least that first crew is going to be brought down to the surface with this thing, and then we are going to be using this as an emergency exit just in case they need to escape back to space. And then this is going to remain as a fusion tug, which I think is kind of cool. This thing should be fairly capable on its own and be able to move payloads back and forth with a 2.5 meter diameter, which could be helpful for things in the future. I don't have any immediate plans for it, but it's always good to have those sorts of things. So as this is going, I suppose we should talk about kind of where we're going next here. So I have a couple more pieces that we are going to be sending out to Duna, and the idea here is that we are going to be sending out an initial expedition of 6 Kerbals, which you've seen. We have 1 scientist and 5 engineers that are going to be heading out there to do the initial setup of the base. They are going to be building stuff. They are going to be setting up all the modules, constructing all the bases, and living and working on the surface of Duna until such time as the whole area is set up and ready to go. While that is happening, we are going to be moving back to the Minmus base, which we will be slightly expanding to make sure that the people on Minty Station are not left in the cold, so to speak, and are able to... Hold on a second. Holy crap. There's like individual plumes in here that gimbal. That's crazy. Okay, sorry. I never knew that. That's kind of amazing. Gosh, what was I even saying? Yeah, so we're going to have individual bases back on Minty Station that are being built to kind of test out some of the theories of the things that I'm going to be doing on Duna simultaneously before I send stuff out there. So we will be continuing to use our bases on Minmus, even though we are moving on to focus more on Duna. And some of the things that I want to test are building with mobile construction units and building and attaching base pieces out of whole construction kits. You know, the kind of things that we're doing right away. So yeah, you can look forward to those things coming up as we get these things landed on Duna. And here we are finishing up this burn. Just one more second, and there we go. Let's see how we did. All right, we are pretty darn close, so I'm gonna turn off this node here, and then we can just make this little correction burn a little bit. We want to be in a pretty close to polar orbit. Everything else is pretty much secondary. Yeah, although we could probably, while we're at it, if I change our inclination, ooh, floating point errors, how you doing? Yeah, if we change our inclination just slightly, we can actually bring this down to a good orbit. Perfect! That is a fantastic intercept. I love it. Alright, so this is on its way to Duna. Alright, so before we let this thing fly out into the great unknown, we are going to go ahead and make sure that the actual communitrons are extended, because everything that we're sending out right now is going to be robotic, so it is going to need good connection to be able to make it out without, you know, becoming disconnected and not able to, you know, be controlled and communicate, that sort of thing. So yeah, here we are just about heading out, and there we go. We are in the orbit of the sun, in a heliocentric orbit, on our way transferring over to Duna. And unfortunately, that is all the time that I have for this episode. So coming up, we are going to be launching the other 2 items we have to get them on the way out to Duna as well. And then we will get there and execute our mission. So I will see you next time.